Alright, we're at 50 psi, so we'll cut the compressor off. I've got the regulator set on my compressor to slowly let the air out. Over the course of probably the next half hour, the pressure in the tank will get back to normal. The resin takes a few hours, or the silicone, I'm sorry, takes a few hours to set. So what I usually do is pour a mold at night and revisit it the next day. So when we come back the next installment, we'll have a mold and show you how that turns out, and we'll be ready to pour a ring. Alright, as you can see, we've pulled the mold out of the pressure pot. Still has some curing to do, so for the sake of time we're just going to use a mold that's already been set up. Basically what you would do is just remove the hot glue, take the mold box out, pull the mold out. It would be upside down like this, and when you turn it over you'll see the fill sprue and the vent sprue, and taking the X-Acto knife with a scalpel blade, just slowly start cutting along the center, working your way down, careful not to cut too deep into the ring wax, and eventually you end up with a mold that you will fill with the resin. Okay, so basically what we have here, I'm going to go ahead and pour one. What I like to do is put the mold back in the mold box, just because when we pressurize it you want to keep everything from expanding. You can also just take the mold itself, wrap it with a rubber band real tight. So we're going to go ahead. This one that we're going to be pouring tonight is a orange lantern ring. The cast tonight is Smooth Cast 327 resin. Again, 1:1 mixing ratio. We've already got them poured here. We've got our part B and our part A. The tint that I'm going to use for the orange resin is also from Smooth On. It's a So Strong orange tint for this one. This stuff goes a long way. So basically what I did is just poured one drop in the cup here, and I'm going to take just a minuscule amount of this to color the ring. And with plastic stuff, I've got some plastic chopsticks here which I like to use to mix. I'm going to dip the end of the chopstick in the end of the dye and just get a very small amount. Okay, mix it into part B of the resin first. I'm going to put it in there, stir it around a little bit, get it going. Not to worry about the bubbles here, we will get rid of those shortly. Once I got the majority of that off, I'll wipe that tip of the chopstick off and then put the larger tip in for the main stirring. Basically I'll just stir this until it's nice and dissipated. Again, if you were doing this without a pressure casting system, you'd want to use a resin that's set up a lot slower and try not to stir it so much and get all the bubbles in there. But we're going to use a couple of tricks here to help dissipate some of the bubbles. Okay, so that's mixed up pretty good there. You can see that I've got a nice transparent orange for the resin there. Still see all the bubbles in there, but we're going to get rid of those. Wipe off my chopstick so I can use it another day. Okay, one of the things I like to do as a trick, just to help get rid of the bubbles, is use a hair dryer on low setting, and not necessarily so much just to heat the resin, but it does help disperse some of the bubbles. So okay, that's just the abbreviated version. The hardener basically has no bubbles in it, so I'm just going to take the end of the chopstick, work whatever bubbles are around the edges to one side, and just basically manually pop those. Takes a few minutes, but nothing major. You can see that as you go, just moving them to one side, pulling them up on the side of the cup, and popping them. The pressure casting that we're going to do is going to get rid of most of these anyway, so it's really not that big a deal. Okay, so the vast majority of the bubbles are gone. So now what we can do is we can go ahead and mix our hardener with the resin, which is here. I'm just going to pour this in. Now the Smoothcast 327 takes several minutes to set up, so it's got a pretty decent pot life. Using some of the other Smoothcast resins that set up quickly, it's kind of hard to get all of the bubbles out. Okay, so now we're just going to stir this around. And you can see it's kind of cloudy at this point until we get all the resin and all the dye mixed in, part A and part B mixed smoothly together. It'll be nice and transparent. Okay, now you can see we've got our resin mix now. It's nice and transparent with the hardener in it. Again, this has a pretty decent pot life, so you're in no real hurry to get these poured. So now this is going to be the orange lantern mold, and I'm going to pour the resin into the pour sprue. Not too fast. We want to try to alleviate as much air as we can. As it starts to fill up there, you'll see it rise up the vent sprue. We're just a little bit over. So now that we know we have a full mold, you can see it in both areas. You can give it a couple of presses, a couple of taps if you want. Not real necessary since we're doing the pressure casting anyway. The air is going to rise to the top. So now we're going to take this, put it back in our pressure pot. Make sure everything is nice and tight so no air escapes. And we're going to turn the air compressor back on and get it back up to 50 psi, just like we did the mold. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll revisit this later and we'll show you what it looks like when we pull it out of the mold.